So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Adobe Technical Communication webinar series. And we are talking about experience strategy today. And with us today is Tony Rems, the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Business Development at Hero Digital, and a couple of colleagues with him. They will introduce themselves in a few slides. And Tony is the main presenter here today, and he founded and ran his own company, Thought Metrics, before joining Hero Digital, and also worked for several years as the CTO of a global agency, SBI Razorfish. Razorfish is probably well known to a lot of people, where he oversaw the IT strategy for a number of their largest clients, including companies like Visa, Metal, Symantec, and AT&T. And Tony has been working with the Adobe team since before the Day acquisition. Adobe CQ was from Day, a former product that merged into Adobe Experience Manager, or changed to Adobe Experience Manager many years back. And he has led dozens of Adobe implementations for the world's largest brands. And the provocative question of our webinar today is, does your experience strategy include your self-service channels? And we will learn from Hero Digital how companies are addressing their large, complex, and expanding technical documentation. Whether you are a native SaaS organization, a SaaS organization, or a leader in your field with a unique software capability, you would take away a few main learnings in this session today. How to assess if your current experience and CMS strategy supports technical documentation. Address if your different channel needs, like self-service and whitelist partners for content syndication. And how to apply new taxonomy and tagging structure for your structured content. Of course, we're talking about data here as well. And how to leverage your assessment in Adobe Experience Manager with content and experience fragments. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And Tony, welcome, and welcome to your team who's joining us today. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Tony, and you can start sharing your screen.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate you guys joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to. Can everybody see that screen?
Currently, it's still black, but that will change probably in a second.
Hang on, let me see what's going on there. I'm going to do something a little different here and see if that works. You guys see it now?
No, still black.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Something different than in our test check.
It was working just a minute ago. I'm going to actually go ahead and switch to this screen, and
now it works.
How's that?
That looks great.
Okay, awesome. All right.
Okay.
Well,
stage is all
again,
yours. And,
all right.
Have fun in presenting.
Always. Well, thanks everybody for making time for us today. So as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the need for focus on experience in your self-service channels. As Stefan mentioned, I've been working in Silicon Valley for over 30 years, over 20 years helping organizations deploy advanced customer experience infrastructure, and been working with organizations on data for the last 12 years or so. And I think, a big piece of what we found is, there's always a lot of focus on, we talk to marketers and say, hey, we own the entire experience end to end. And unfortunately, what we found is that their end to end doesn't always include the self-service channels. And we're going to talk about why that's an issue and how we think about approaching that and making sure we're thinking about kind of everything holistically, from documentation, self-service, kind of all those pieces and how important they are to our relationship with our customers. So first off, the team. So I've got a few members of the team here with me. George handles our relationship with Adobe, and Aldo on our team he's really our lead architect across all things for our component content management and everything we do there. And Carl is our EVP of strategy, and Carl and I have worked together for over 20 years, and so he'll chime in on some questions here and be kind of part of that conversation. So Just a quick intro to Hero. So Hero Digital, we're a customer experience company, right? So that means we're not an agency that kind of rebranded ourselves around CX. We've really been focused around customer experience and delivering on kind of a vision for unified customer experience and leveraging customer experience to drive business. We're headquartered in San Francisco, but we have offices across the country. Our big hubs are San Francisco, Austin, and Philadelphia. A little over 400 people, and we have a pretty broad range of services. And so, we organize those services into kind of three key areas. So we call them invent, transform, and perform. Invent being kind of helping customers kind of come up with new products and think about, how they innovate and how we kind of create new solutions to connect customers to the brand. Next is transformation. And this is kind of this big bucket of everything around design and implementing new platforms and data architecture. And we have a full range of services from strategy, design, UX, implementation, very deep in technology, data, analytics, media, performance, kind of across the board. And we organize them in these buckets because this is typically the way our customers are thinking about the things that they need to do, right? We need to come up with something new and really invent. We need to transform something. And then finally, we think about performance, which is whether it's email, whether it's media, whatever it is, thinking about how we drive towards KPIs. So as Stefan mentioned, I've been working with the Adobe team since before the Day Software acquisition. We are a platinum Adobe partner. We're certified and we work across the entire Adobe suite. We're global, specialized in some of the key products. We have a big team that works on Adobe initiatives. As you can see, we've been fortunate to work with a lot of the world's great brands on their Adobe initiatives. But it always starts with strategy, right? Kind of what is it you're trying to accomplish? How do we help you get there? And then looking at the right solution that gets us there. And with Adobe, you have kind of this really broad suite that kind of brings a lot to the table. That's why, and they're the leading platform in the enterprise. So for us, they've been a great partner for these types of solutions. So when thinking about the self-service channels, like I said, it's so important for us to think about self-service as just an integrated part of experience. And not, what happens in a lot of organizations, we always talk about, Carl and I talk a lot about how we spend all this money and all this effort to kind of bring in customers, and then when they become customers, we kind of shove them off to some sites that are owned by IT. We might have all our documentation sitting on a separate domain that maybe has our logo and our colors, but it doesn't really kind of match the experience of the rest of the site. And that's a big mistake because customers are more and more their expectations for what they get in those self-service channels are rising, and we're going to talk about kind of some of the data that we've seen and some of the research that's out there in the market around that. And so we'll talk a little bit today about how the truth is we just need to do better and how we get there. So while I think probably a lot of the people on the call recognize the value of customer experience, I think what the numbers show is that the value of that experience of that customer experience is rising, right? And so whether that's companies that focus on CX perform better, we see better revenue, better profits, but I think more importantly we see this customer loyalty, right? The choice of them to work with us comes so much from the experience that they have from a customer service and a self-service perspective. And the self-service is becoming a bigger part of customer service. So we really need to think of it as just a part of that ecosystem, a part of that customer journey, and look at how we solve for that. And as I mentioned, historically, there was a bigger preference for people to get on the phone with someone. That is changing, and this is being accelerated by kind of the current work from home environment. And so, when we think about how customers engage, and we have different kinds of customers. So technical documentation, which is one of the more complex things that we address in self-service, is hard to do. It's hard to create. It's hard to create good documentation, making sure people can find what they're looking for. And a lot of those customers, they want a self-service capability. And so that expectation is there, and we need to deliver on it. And we need to not just have it be there and say, okay, we're going to shove it off to the side. We have to make it a prominent part of what we think of from an experience standpoint. The other piece to think about is that increasingly buyers are looking at those self-service channels as part of their buying cycle. So as they think about their purchase consideration, they go look at the technical documentation, they go look at the self-service environment, they look at the customer portals if possible, and just kind of understand what experience is going to be like for them when working with the product. And with the quality of the documentation that they're going to get, the quality of the support that they're going to get, that's a big indicator. It's hard to say what a phone call, like kind of phone support's going to be like, but you can look and see what kind of that support they're going to get from a self-service perspective. But again, we still see these organizations that have all this content, all this documentation just locked up in PDFs. The more technical an organization gets, sometimes the more that there is a tendency to just generate thousands of PDFs. I did a recent analysis of one of our new customers, and found they actually had more PDFs on their site than they had pages. So none of their documentation was in HTML format. It was all in PDFs, and so more actual PDF content than HTML content on the site. That's a difficult experience for a lot of users, and we're not really kind of thinking about that. And sometimes that documentation can get out of date, out of sync, and so it creates a lot of overhead. So it decreases your velocity and creates customer frustration. So when we look back kind of at technical documentation, which is a key component here, there's, people have been creating technical documentation for a long time. Historically, there was a lot of sort of more monolithic document generation, which is, just long form content. Somebody's creating these pieces, they're generating a PDF, passing it off. In the early 2000s, IBM was doing some research, and they found that over half of the training materials that they were putting out there was actually just cut and paste from their documentation. And so, but what would happen is this documentation they'd cut and paste something, somebody would create, 5 or 6 training materials, they would create some different documentation they're putting out there. And as soon as that documentation got updated, every one of those documents was out of date, and there was no way to track them. And so you have kind of out of date information, this very kind of heavy process for kind of trying to keep everything up to date. Somebody's keeping a spreadsheet of all the different documents. It's a pretty difficult way to work. And so ultimately they created DITA, which is the Darwin Information Typing Architecture, which is a way of kind of thinking about structuring documents in a kind of a better way. And so it's an XML-based approach. They open sourced that in 2005, and that's when the first version was published as open source. And so this architecture was created really to allow us to share documentation, kind of both within a document and also kind of cross document. So looking at how we kind of create something that is ultimately reusable, but doesn't require, so we want to have interchange and interoperability, but without having to have everyone who touches that document agree on one standard document type definition that says this is what this is. We want to think about unlocking the content. Creating all this content and creating this documentation is hard. It's a lot of work. It's expensive, right? And so kind of doing all this work without looking at how we can take that and look at how we can reuse it. If that content, and again, not every piece of documentation is getting reused, but there's still value in thinking about it in a way that makes it easy to update, because there's typically a lot of collaboration on these documents along the way, a lot of back and forth, there's updates that need to be made. So kind of having a common source of truth and a way of tracking all this information is where DITA really came in. And so when we think about we talked earlier about that customer success, how do we make our customers successful? How do we give them the tools to self-serve and do what they're looking to do? It's really important that we look at, one, how we make sure that we always have accurate information, and that two, that it's easy to find. So we empower them to do what they need to do. We help them work with our product. We help them think about finding things, about discoverability, about and making sure that whatever channel that they're coming in through, that we have consistent information that is easy for them to find, easy for them to use, and really kind of makes them successful. That's how we drive customer loyalty. We reduce that churn. I think I read something about there's something like $50 trillion in revenue lost in American corporations every year from just churn, from customers just leaving your brand, going to a different brand. Well, we can reduce that churn by creating customer success, and so we want to really think of it through that lens. So the other piece is understanding that a document, even when we're creating kind of one monolithic document, it's really not just, kind of one document. It's really, in most cases, there's multiple people involved, people contributing, maybe the engineers contributing some content, marketing contributing some content, different people contributing content. And then you have a lot of collaboration and a lot of back and forth. And so that kind of orchestration, like as we said, we think about those customer journeys, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But this documentation has its own journey, right? It goes through our enterprise, and without the right set of tools, it's hard to have one process, make sure you have a single source of truth, and it's hard to keep everything up to date, especially when you're generating multiple different things. You're generating those PDFs, you're generating HTML, you're generating training documentation, you have content that you want to surface on your customer portals. You have all this documentation and content, and again, our goal is to unlock that content and make sure that we can maximize the value of that content, both from a creation standpoint, but also from a usability standpoint for our customers. So laddering back to thinking about customer experience kind of at every point in our process. So this is kind of what we have here, is just thinking about how customers now come in and engage with our brand, and how they're thinking about all the different ways in their entire cycle, whether it's kind of discovery, consideration, purchase, wherever they are in that process. And once we get to self-service, there's kind of the use of the product. We want to stop thinking about every single piece of those content in silos. We want to think about kind of holistically the content that we want to create to manage all the journeys from that discovery process all the way through support and engagement and self-service. And so really kind of thinking about how we have one single source of truth, one single platform that helps us create all that content, and then gives us the flexibility to kind of surface that content within the context that our customers need. And so great experiences are that kind of intersection of the right content and the right context, right? So when we bring those things together, we have customer success. And so understand that there's a lot of tools that are out there that help us with different pieces of this, but it's important for us to really bring that together and kind of help our customers kind of solve for all of those things. So DITA, as we said, and I know we have probably kind of a broad range of experience across everybody on this call. So I think we have people who know DITA really well. We have people who are kind of newer to some of these things. So we're not teaching a class on DITA, and so not today. And so we just kind of, I want to provide a little bit of overview of what kind of these terms are and what it all means, so that we can kind of have context for everybody as we talk through this. So what you see here on the screen is how we structure things in DITA. So we start with these topics. We have a bunch of kind of information underneath it. So topics have these sections and subsections and different relationships, and that granularity maps very well to actually the way assets are typically managed in a digital asset management system. And so when you think about it, componentizing that content gives us the flexibility to then assemble things, but also to take those different elements and leverage them in different ways. And so when I'm going to come back to why that kind of mapping of the taxonomic structure that DITA supports along kind of maps to how assets are used in digital asset management. Now, once we've created these documents, the value here is we can take the elements from these different topics, and we can use the different pieces of it to create different kinds of publications. And so those kind of outputs that come out of this process are called publications in DITA. And so whether it's those PDFs, whether it's used for our training documentation, whether it's tech specs, product documentation, help, whatever it is, we can create all those. We can create those different formats. We can output all the different documents, and use some of the authoring tools that people can use. And there's a lot of different authoring XML authoring tools out there. They'll also allow us to kind of create some of that formatting and then output those documents. So kind of thinking through that creation of documentation, a collaboration that goes along with it, and in a little bit, Aldo is going to demo a little bit of how that works within the Adobe platform, just so you can see how that collaboration works and how that's enabled in the platform. So because of that need, we saw the rise of CCMS, right, and component content management. So obviously, I think everybody's familiar with web content management. Component content management is sort of a different kind of path, which was really started with these XML editor documents or platforms, which were a lot of people kind of author for XML. They evolved into these component content management because you have the needs that come out of those platforms for flow and for collaboration and approval and the generation of those outputs. And so component content management that allowed us to kind of manage these things, manage your data documents, collaborate on them, create those components, and then start to kind of enable the rest of the capability. So the CCMS and there's a number of different platforms on the market, although we're going to talk specifically about the Adobe one today. There are a lot of different platforms. So we'll talk about why we typically focus on the Adobe platform a bit. So now getting back to what we kind of where we started, which is how do we start to integrate all these kind of the self-service into our CX overall to ensure that we have consistency across everything. So a lot of the CCMS platforms and like I said, there are a number of different ones on the market. The challenge is they're not necessarily integrated with your experience management platform. So the platform where you're kind of spending the majority of your work to create a lot of those experiences, to drive your branding, to drive those interactions with customers, to drive personalization, to look at your analytics. Those platforms are, if they're separate, typically they tend to get out of sync. So we see a lot of, there's a separate domain that's, brandex.com, and it looks different from the rest of the experience. You have different look and feel, branding maybe is out of date, or maybe there's very limited branding. And so customers go from this branded experience that was used to drive them into your customer. So your acquisition channels have these great, beautiful branded emails. They come to a great branded site. They get a great branded presentation. And then as soon as they become a customer, all of a sudden they get kind of a dumbed down version of our brand, right? And so thinking about how we start to integrate that. And so this is where, for us, the Adobe platform comes in, because how do we bring together web content management or experience management, digital asset management, and this component content management so that we have a unified environment for thinking of, this content that we're creating as an asset that can be, leveraged across however we need to use it. And while kind of creating all the value that comes out of, CCMS, but also leveraging the tools so you have everybody working on one platform. And that's a powerful value proposition. So we're going to talk a little bit about Adobe's component content management system. So we'll dive right in. So what's called the XML documentation extension for AEM is something that's fully integrated with the rest of AEM. So AEM, for those who don't know, Sites is Adobe's web content management or experience management platform that has personalization and analytics and workflow and all that. Their digital asset management system called AEM Assets is a full-featured digital asset management system for the enterprise. Has very deep capabilities around taxonomy, creating relationships between different assets, and then being able to tag and surface all those assets in different ways. And it has, of course, within AEM, you have this drag and drop WYSIWYG editor, which allows us to kind of take all these different components and assemble different experiences. So we can create these beautiful experiences that are branded, that are consistent, and that when we make updates, those updates can cascade through everything, because we're going to inherit all those brand assets. So that's the, we have that Marketing Cloud integration. We have, they have out-of-the-box capabilities for importing all that data content, so there's not a massive effort to kind of restructure your content and move it over. And then the ability to publish. As you know, Adobe is the creator of Acrobat and PDF. So generating PDFs, generating HTML, generating all these different experiences that we need, something that we can do with one platform. So here's just kind of an overview of the architecture. So as I mentioned, one of the benefits of having this digital asset management capability is a lot of most of the XML documentation solution, this CCMS capability, sort of lives on top of assets. So we're leveraging this kind of rich out-of-the-box capability around creating those relationships, around building taxonomy, around kind of working towards a solution that is allows for reuse, but then leveraging the broader capabilities around AEM for workflow, for publishing, for kind of everything that we need to do there to generate those documents, and that collaboration that we're going to see in a little bit when we get to the demo. But ultimately, again, we can use any editor that we want. Adobe has one called FrameMaker. Historically, we saw a lot of FrameMaker and Quark and things like that people used to use. There's a ton of different applications out there that we can use today. So if you have a data editor that you like, you don't have to change. So this is really about creating that single source of truth that is now integrated with all these other channels for what you're doing. And again, if you need to integrate with that with your email channel, that's something you can do through, the integration of Marketo and AEM. So there's this, and we have integrations for other platforms. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to kind of create this unified solution. So what I want to do is kind of shift. I'm going to hand over to Aldo to start to talk a little bit about the Broadcom case study, which I think is a really compelling one because it is the single largest deployment of its kind in the market today. And so they've been a customer of ours for a while. Actually, our customers there have been customers of Carl and mine for on and off from different acquisitions of this company for the last 12 years or so. So, we've helped them with kind of a lot of pieces of this solution, but Aldo's been the point person on the lead. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit about the overall solution there. Aldo?
All right. Thank you, Tony. Hi. So I'll be talking about Broadcom. So if you're not familiar with Broadcom, Broadcom is a technology company located in San Jose, California. And they deal with a wide range of things. They do manufacturing, design, development of hardware and software. So they have a lot of products. They touch a lot of things. In fact, if you have an iPhone, you probably have a Broadcom chip in there. And with all these products, they have to provide technical documentation and support for their users. And they're also a company that has grown considerably due to acquisitions. They acquire a lot of companies, and with each company they acquire, that means more technical documentation they inherit, and it's more documentation that they have to maintain and support. So to that end, Broadcom needed a CCMS solution that not only housed their data content, but also served it. And with that, they went with AEM and the XML documentation plugin. So here are some stats that I think really speak to how robust their solution is and just how far you can push it. So like I said, AEM provides a centralized and comprehensive solution for the data needs. Today, they are live and hosted on techdocs.broadcom.com. So you can go there now. That has all the technical documentation. Right now in the DAM, they have over 1.2 million reusable data assets, and these are all, this is all data content, topics, maps, things like that they can reuse and reuse as needed. They've recently migrated 40,000 assets from a recent semantic acquisition. On their site today, they have over 1 million HTML pages generated from data content. I think right now they might be at like 1.2 million pages. So they have a lot of documentation. They support over 60 content authors all over the globe, working parallel, from a number of places, Japan, parts of Europe, India, North America, etc. And since they're on AEM, they also get multilingual support. They offer support for a few languages, French, Japanese, Chinese, etc. So yeah, they're live, and they have a ton of technical documentation. And so now I just want to go into a demo just to give you a quick overview of the XML documentation plugin and just see how fast you can get up and running with it. So I'll share my screen. So you should be able to see my screen now. I just have a local AEM instance, 6.4, and it has a version of the XML documentation plugin 3.6.5. So here, this is just the DAM. Currently it's empty, but I'm going to create some data content and just show you how fast you can create things like HTML pages from it. So if you have the XML documentation plugin installed and you try to create some new data assets, new DAM content, you can see that there's two options for data assets. So you have topic and map. So I'm just going to create 2 topics and 1 map. So right now I'm creating a topic. I'm just going to make a generic topic. Call this my first topic. And then I'll also create a second topic. My second topic. Then lastly, I'll create a map that will contain these two topics. Here's my map. And if you're not familiar with DITA, a map, you can kind of think of it like a table of contents, and each topic is a chapter in that table. So here's my map. I'm going to open a few screens or a few tabs here, so it's just easier to jump between the different topics and maps. So right now I have one map and two topics. I'm going to go ahead and open the map editor as well as the topic editors. And I'll show you how to author some DITA content. Let's open up the first topic here and then the last topic. And then to get to the actual editor, I'm going to use the first topic and I'll just hit this edit button. And this will bring up the DITA editor. And you can see here, I get my WYSIWYG editor for this topic. You can click into this. You can see here it says short description. So I'm just going to add in some placeholder text. And you can immediately start authoring DITA content. So I'll just put in more placeholder text. And some of the things you can do here, you can insert DITA elements. So in DITA, it's just an XML spec, and the XML spec defines different elements that you can use. You see here, you get a number of things, Booleans, code blocks, data, div, things like titles, subheadings. So here I'm just going to insert a code block. You can see what that looks like. Put some content into there. The code block, I'm going to insert just another element so we can see a few different things. Let's see. Put in a note, and I'll put in some content into here. And so that's a good amount of content. You have a few options in the editor. You can toggle between author. This is the view that we see now. You can go to the source, and this will just show the XML content. Like I said, it's just a specification, and you can see here it's just regular plain old HTML or XML. So you can consider this your source of truth. And then there's the preview mode. This gives you a preview of the content. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this topic. We have some stuff in here. And I'm also going to save a version of the topic. So this will be my first version. And then I'll hop over to the second topic, and I'll do the same thing. I'll just author in some content, and then we'll start generating some outputs from it. So here's my second topic. I'll put in some more placeholder text. And I'll just leave this one pretty bare. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Also save a version of this. And then we'll hop over to the map. So first, I'm actually going to just include the topics in the map. So once you open the map editor, you have a few different tabs. If you go over to the topics tab, you can see there's no topics associated with this map. So I'm going to go ahead and add some topics. Let me do that. So this will bring you over to the map editor. And from here, you can drag in some topics. So you see here on my left-hand side, I have my first topic and my second topic. I'm going to go ahead and add that to the map. So now I have two topics. And you can also toggle between, so this is the WYSIWYG view of the map editor, but you can also go to the XML mode and just take a look at it there. And this is just plain old XML. And you can see it has references to my two topics. I'll just hit done and save this. And then we can go back and actually start generating outputs from this. So this is kind of the power of DITA. separating your data from your presentation layer, the presentation layer being things like HTML pages, PDFs, EPUBs, and things like that. And so authors only really care about the data and the source of truth, and then everyone else cares about the other formats. And by keeping it separate, it allows for reuse and just faster, just better productivity overall. So here out of the box, we get a few different outputs. We get, AAM sites, PDFs, HTML5. I'm going to go ahead and generate an AAM site. So earlier I added my topics to my site. If we go to the output tab, it gives us a progress view of the different outputs. So my AAM site is done generating, generated in about 5 seconds. So if I click on this, it should take me to the site. And here is the out-of-the-box template and design for AAM sites. And you can see here, this is my top-level view. This is my map. And then I have my 2 topics here. If I click into my first topic, I see the content for my first topic. I get my short description, my title, my text. Here's my code block and my note. And you can also click into the second topic from the left-hand nav. And like I said, this is just the out-of-the-box template. I want to show you what a similar page on Broadcom looks like, just so you can get a sense of just how much you can customize. Because under the hood, these are all just AAM components. So it'll map data elements to AAM components. And since they're just AAM components, you can extend them, overlay them, customize them as needed. So let me actually just open up, let me move this over.
And one of the things to note is that this means that we can inherit all the branding and design and development work we did for the website for these templates, right? And so we've taken those and applied them so they just look like a unified part of the site overall. So you're not having to like bring brand elements over from one system into the other and kind of keep them up to date and all of that. It's just one site.
Right, exactly. And so here is a side-by-side view. Hopefully will render decently. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. So on the left, you have the out-of-the-box template and design. And on the right, you have actually the same exact template, but applied with, the Broadcom styles. And so you can see just how much of this you can customize. Under the hood, the XML content is very similar. The only difference is the presentation layer. And that speaks to the power of Data and what you can do with it. So yeah, this is just a regular topic page, same type of content, but just they look different. So I'll go back into my AAM instance. And if we go back to the output presets tab, we can look at some of the other outputs. Let me zoom back in. And out of the box, like I said, you get PDFs as well. So you can even generate a PDF. Although I think this one will look quite plain. And you can also generate some HTML5, and this will just give you a zip of some HTML files that you could, use for other purposes if you need to distribute the content elsewhere. So I'll let these generate. We'll just take a look at the PDF. So the PDF is done, about 9 seconds. Click into it. I'll open it up. And you can see this is a PDF. It has the same content, my map, and it should have 2 topics, my first topic and my second topic. And you can see them here. My code block, my note, etc. And then I won't show you the HTML5, but if you click on this, it'll actually just give you a zip file of the HTML content, which you could unzip and take a look at. So just the last thing I want to show you is a review task, just to show about how this plugin, empowers authors and collaborators to work together. So this was just a really quick view of authoring some data content and generating things from it. So let me just go to, let me start a review task. So if I go to topics, you can create a review task here. But before I do that, actually, I'm going to create a project to house these tasks. So I'll go to my AAM project screen. I'm just going to create a new project here. And this is where you would add the different authors and collaborators who need to work on this data content. So I'll just make a project here. Right now, it's just myself, my admin user. I'll create it. I'll open it up. And right now, there shouldn't be any workflows or tasks happening. So you get this reviews tile. Currently there are no reviews, but I'll go back to my data map, go to the topic tab, hit create review task, and then I can show you how the review tool works. So I'll just call this my review task. I'll add this to my newly created project, and I'll just assign this to everybody inside of the project. Give the project a due date, and I'll allow anybody to review this topic or review the topics in the project. And so I'm creating a review task for 2 topics, my first topic and my second topic. I'll do it on the first version, so latest version, hit next, and then I will just create the task. So the task has been created. I should be able to see it in my project screen. So if I go back here and refresh, I should see review in this tile now, and it's here. If I click on the 3 dots, it'll bring me up to the review tool. If I just click into here, it's in progress. And this will bring you to the review tool. And you see here on my left-hand side, these are the topics to review. So I have my first topic and my second topic. And what you can do is you can work with other authors and collaborate on this document by using some of the tools here. So you can annotate this basically. So like here's a highlighting feature. Highlight text. I'll leave my comment. Some highlighted text. You can strike through things. Please remove this text. You can insert text, offer suggestions, add this text, and the last thing you can do is just commenting in general. And then you can see all these different notes appear on the right side, and other authors can come in, reply to the notes, make the updates, and then you can go forward with the review task and close it out. But yeah, that's basically it for the demo. I just want to show you how you can get up and running quickly with the XML Doc plugin. And I also want to show how you could use it to collaborate with other authors and use the review tool to make edits and things like that.
Great. Yeah, and a few things to note. As Aldo mentioned, these data elements get mapped to components in AEM, and components is the way AEM enables authoring, drag and drop authoring. So that means these become components that you can use to drag onto different pages. So we're leveraging the same paradigm that we're using for creating web experiences, and basically just incorporating the data piece into the overall kind of constellation of everything we can do. So all the features that you have for creating websites, you now have available to you to leverage the content from your documentation into the site however you like. We can also tag content from documentation that we could surface for personalization if we wanted to do that. So if you wanted to have contextual documentation that you surface based on what users are doing or based on what we know about them and their roles and things like that, it creates a lot of flexibility. And then finally, we get the analytics component where we can track how users are leveraging documentation, what documentation they're getting to, what's being used, how well it's performing, and really start to use that documentation and content in the way that we use all the other content on the site, really looking at how well it's performing, looking at how, what the advantages our customers are getting from it, and really turning them into the kind of assets that we want that documentation to be. So I'm going to re-share my screen so we can finish up here. And we definitely wanted to leave time for questions and make sure that we got to address any open questions. So I'm just going to kind of summarize here at this point. So just the key things we see are, increasing our velocity, right? So looking at how quickly Aldo was able to kind of set up document. We understand that actually writing content, writing that documentation is a lot of work, but the goal is to kind of remove the difficulties associated with kind of that kind of creation and collaboration and everything else, and that having a single source of truth for that for all that content means that you're not having to kind of do tasks over and over again, that collaboration is simple and easy, that the people are using one single system instead of kind of 5 or 6 different systems. We also have the capability to import all of the existing DITA documentation. So if you're already doing DITA today and you're looking to move to kind of more a CCMS so that you can do more of that collaboration, we can import all that DITA content and start to map it to components right away. It's very simple to do. You can use whatever XML authoring tool that you want to use. So we're not saying, hey, you have to switch to a specific one. So leveraging that is still there. Again, that content, as I mentioned earlier, is unlocked. So when we move from thinking of content as just pages to thinking of it as content that we can leverage in context, right? So it's leveraged in all those different publications that we talked about, but it can also be used to surface as personalization. So if we have really quality content, which we might want to surface as, for example, if people are on a support site and we know they have a specific role, we might want to surface like a tip that comes out of the documentation, which is, hey, did you know that you can do X? But here, if we have an engineer, we might surface some content that might be valuable to them, and so that's something we can do in an automated fashion. Then, again, unifying that branding and design, and this is a key component of the customer experience, right? Is making sure that they don't feel like they're getting bounced around to these different sites, that they feel like this is a unified, that self-service is a unified part of the overall experience with your brand. Then again, enabling the web authoring. So the great thing about AEM's authoring capability is it's very simple, drag and drop. So you don't, there's not a big learning curve in terms of using it. And and users who already know how to do authoring for the web now can immediately start leveraging the DITA content in the same way. And then we've got, along with that, you get the DAM capabilities and analytics around looking at content and performance of all that content and where it's been used today. So if you have content that's being used in multiple places, you can look in the DAM and say, hey, here are all the places this content's being used, and then go check that. So when you do updates, you can go verify that it looks right and everywhere that it's being used. So there's all this capability and functionality that comes out of integrating all these things in one place and having a single source of truth versus having multiple disparate systems. So getting back to that goal of creating a self-service experience that is unified with your overall customer experience and is at par and with all those customer experiences, we found that leveraging the Adobe suite with the XML extension really gives us the ability to do that without losing any of what we were looking for from the CCMS. We get a lot of enhanced capabilities that most of the other platforms don't have, and that's the way we typically approach it today. So from there, I'm going to move to just to wrap up and questions. So we're going to open it up for questions from everybody on the call.
We do have one question around authoring of complex tables. I don't know, Aldo, if you want to take a crack at it.
Yeah, so DITA does support a table element, and so I could actually insert a table if I was in the editor view. Depending on how complex the table is, it may or may not serve your needs, but it definitely supports tables. Yeah. And if it doesn't, if it's too complex and it's really custom, you could actually create a custom DITA element, but that would require some custom dev effort. Yeah. And I'll post a link in the chat actually to the DITA specification for the table. And I'll show kind of the different parameters that it supports, and maybe it'll work for your use case, but it depends. Yeah.
So other questions from folks on the call?
There's a question about learning resources from Tekla. Hi. There are a couple of online helps at adobe.com. I will search them out for you and put them in the chat. If I cannot find it fast enough now because I'm doing multiple things in parallel, I will drop you an email after the webinar, okay? Let me check. And for all the others, please don't be shy. This is your chance to ask questions.
Well, while we're waiting on questions, one of the things that that comes up quite frequently in these kinds of engagements is what we call content operations, right? So we typically find that, by being able to use the CCMS, we can actually relook at how all the different content contributors work and make the actual working much more efficient. If you remember earlier in the presentation, Tony had the picture around different content authors, and if you think about just the Broadcom example of having 60 contributors around the globe in the process, the different roles and how they need to maintain the system has allowed them to change pretty dramatically. So, prior you had, a workflow that required all of them to work in sort of serial format to create these documents. Now things, even on tables, a perfect example, right? So, they have a lot of complex, like operating system compatibility charts and things of that nature, which are changing continuously, of course, right? As OSs get updated and things of that nature, new parts get released. So now, the product engineering team can simply focus on updating that table, and it cascades throughout the rest of the system. So that's changed the way they actually operate. So when you go down this path, it's actually useful to take a look at how you produce these content elements today, and then mapping to, like I said, a content operations model that automates a lot of that workflow and distributes the work in different ways. So that's one of the key things that I think is really important to take a look at, very early on in this process.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other questions? No? Okay. So, I think as the next step, if anybody on the call does have questions, please don't feel free to reach out. We have contacts here from both Adobe and Hero, so feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. We're also happy to schedule kind of a call to kind of discuss what you're looking to do on this front. I think this was a pretty high level overview, because we could talk about this for many hours, and I think every organization has a lot of different ways that they approach this, especially the larger you are, when you have companies like Broadcom who have done so many acquisitions, or I talked to folks at NVIDIA today just about all the different kinds of documentation. When you have a technical organization, people are probably using 10 or 12 different things, depending on what group they're in and depending on how technical they are. So there, there's a lot to think about as we think through what's the right set of tools, how do we prioritize, what is the process, and what's the right approach, and how we get where we want to go. And we're happy to hop on a call with you to kind of talk through that and kind of brainstorm a little bit about the best way to accomplish your goals. And so, some organizations have a lot of content reuse. They create a lot of content. They like to really push the envelope in terms of leveraging that for long form personalization and looking at analytics and everything else. And some organizations are really just want to get the kind of the branding and the customer experience just right. So whatever your goals are from that perspective, that's where we want to start, and really kind of help you through that process to say, here's what you need. Here's, is Adobe the right solution for you, and what that might look like. And from Here's perspective, our process is going to can factor that in from really just starting with goals and putting a roadmap together and looking what the right kind of combination of tools is for you to get where you want to go. So we're happy to hop on a call and spend some time with you in terms of getting to the right answer and taking you through that process.
Yeah. Tony, I was maybe missing a few minutes, but there was a question from Tracy Langenbach. Does the system support contribution from clients? Did you guys answer that while I was away for a minute?
We did not.
Okay. Tracy, I'm not sure what you mean with clients. If it's like clients of your company, or if it's like content contributors, like subject matter experts within your team, like colleagues or so. Maybe you can specify that a little bit more. Otherwise, we assume maybe that it's about content contribution from subject matter experts in the first place.
So there's a number of different ways to address that. We've addressed that through the creation of some tools that allow for external users to contribute some content and have that content then drop into a workflow internally. And so what that does is allows them to, if they upload a PDF or if they just want to upload content and maybe add some metadata, we can structure a form. So we built a form for contribution by external users that allows them to drop that content in. They don't have to have a login. You don't want those external users to have a login to your system per se. So having this form that allows them to drop that content in, provide some notes, have all of that drop into a workflow on internally on the AEM side, and then have somebody review that content, determine the right place for it, maybe follow up directly with that user around questions or feedback, or go through an internal review process, maybe convert that content. They may cut and paste it. They may, it may be something they want to use directly, and looking at how they then can drop that into the system. But we definitely want to have that control around it. So we want to take content that comes from external users, kind of put it in a bit of a box so that it can go through that review process before it gets into anything, so that we make sure that it's formatted correctly, that the content is of the quality that we want, that it gets, that we know where it goes into our taxonomy, that it has the right metadata associated with it, so that we can leverage it in the way we need to. But we definitely have a form that allows us that we can customize pretty easily, that allows us to take that content and put it into a workflow in a really straightforward way.
There are a lot of content migration tools built in, like migrating from Microsoft Word documents or even InDesign documents into XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. So this is there. And of course, other people in your company can just, with the right URL, you send them a URL for the topic, and they can just jump in, type in some content, and then you take over for example, as a technical writer, and finalize and polish the content that your subject matter experts have contributed in the web editor. And then the review process that Tony mentioned, this is also there. Tracy also put in the chat a follow-up question. Can the intended audience, the end user, also contribute content? So that is, I would say, not so clever to do, maybe. Depends a little bit on the scenario, of course. But usually the idea here is that people from the company who own the content, so to say, contribute the content and finalize the content and publish the content. And for end users, you can integrate something like Adobe Livefire so that they can comment on a published topic, for example. Let's say you publish your help portal, and then there's a topic, and you could put a commenting field below it with Adobe Livefire. And then customers, any kind of external audience could comment on the topic, ask questions there or so, or even build a complete chat forum, so to say, for one single topic. So this kind of content contribution from external parties is possible. Otherwise, you would always route them by having a one-on-one conversation with an external content provider and say, okay, send me your content and I will put it in the system. But giving access to your content database and content management system to an external customer or so would be maybe a little dangerous. That's probably not a good idea, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe I've misunderstood the question.
All right. Well, we're almost up against the hour. Any final questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, then.
I think so. So, Tony, thanks a lot, and Aldo for walking us through the service of Hero Digital and the system as such. Very, very good presentation, I think. Very good overview, and I hope the people in the audience also liked it and found it valuable. And we will make the recording accessible in 1 or 2 days after this webinar. So if you want to rewatch it or show it to your colleagues, you can also do that. And with that, I say thank you to everyone who was attending, and thank you to Aldo and Tony and Carl and George. Thanks. It was great to have you guys here today, and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.